Last night, Stephen Colbert's Late Show turned into chaos when Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General and fierce Trump loyalist, was kicked off live TV in tears. What was supposed to be a routine interview became a showdown that no one saw coming. The clash spiraled out of control, leaving the studio stunned, the audience divided, and social media on fire within minutes. It was the kind of meltdown that late-night television rarely sees, and it is already being called one of the most explosive moments in Colbert's career. Bondi walked onto that stage ready to defend her record and her loyalty, but she walked off broken, shaken, and in tears. Colbert's sharp wit collided with her steely confidence, and the result was a storm that left millions talking. From the opening jab to the shocking ending, this was not just an interview. It was a public unraveling that shook the room and exploded online. Before we unpack this wild meltdown, drop a comment with where you are watching from, and hit subscribe so you do not miss jaw-dropping breakdowns like this. Pam Bondi is not a stranger to the spotlight. As the former Attorney General of Florida, she built a reputation as a tough prosecutor who aligned herself closely with Donald Trump during his rise to power. She stood on his rallies, praised his leadership, and became one of his most visible defenders. For years she carried that image of strength and loyalty, often sparring with critics who accused her of putting politics above the law. That is the Pam Bondi who walked into the Late Show studio last night. Confident, ready, determined to prove that she was still unshaken. On the other side sat Stephen Colbert. A comedian? Yes, but also a late-night host who has built his career on sharp wit and relentless political humor. He has faced down senators, mocked presidents, and taken on some of the most powerful figures in Washington with a grin and a punchline. Colbert was not about to hand out a friendly conversation. He came prepared to push, to prod, and to see if Pam Bondi's armor would hold under the lights of his stage. The moment she stepped out, Bondi carried herself like she was in control. She smiled, waved to the crowd, and took her seat across from Colbert, as if this were just another television appearance. Her posture was straight, her voice steady, her tone confident. She had walked into courtrooms before. She had faced critics in interviews. To her, this was nothing new. But the room carried a tension that was hard to ignore. The audience knew Colbert's style, and many sensed sparks would fly. Colbert wasted no time. With a smirk that signaled he was ready for battle, he leaned forward and asked, "Pam, are you here tonight to defend justice, or just Donald's playbook?" It was a simple question, but the bite behind it landed like a punch. The audience erupted. Some laughed loudly, enjoying the jab. Others shifted in their seats, unsure where this was headed. Bondi's smile tightened, but she kept her composure. "I am here for truth, Stephen. Not your cheap shots," she said firmly. Her words drew a mix of cheers and groans from the crowd. The split in the audience mirrored the divide in the country itself. Some were with her. Some were against her. That first exchange set the tone. Colbert's sharpness, Bondi's determination, a crowd ready to react at every turn. The stage was set for a clash that would grow far beyond a simple interview. Colbert leaned back in his chair and, with a quick wave to the control room, asked for the big screen behind them to play a clip. Suddenly the audience was watching Pam Bondi on stage at a Trump rally, smiling wide, praising his leadership, and calling him the only true defender of American values. Another clip followed, then another, each one louder, more exaggerated, showing her loyalty on full display. As the final clip ended, Colbert turned to her with that sly grin. "So, Pam, is this the law speaking, or is this just blind loyalty to Donald Trump?" His voice was light, but the question cut deep. The audience reacted instantly, with laughter mixed with gasps. Some clapped in agreement, while others booed at the sharpness of the jab. The room was divided, and the energy was starting to shift. Bondi did not flinch. She leaned forward, locked eyes with Colbert, and fired back. "It is law and loyalty, Stephen. I have fought real battles in courtrooms while you sling jokes for a living. You can mock me, but you cannot erase the work I have done." Her voice was steady, but her expression carried a flash of anger. That line drew a strong reaction. A section of the crowd cheered loudly, standing in support. Another group booed, shouting back toward the stage. The tension was no longer subtle. It was alive, buzzing through the studio, as if the walls themselves could feel the clash unfolding. Colbert smirked again, playing off the moment. Well, I guess comedy is my battlefield. And tonight, you are standing right in the middle of it. The crowd roared with laughter, but Bondi's jaw tightened. She was not here to be the punchline. In the corner of the set, producers exchanged quick glances. They had seen heated interviews before, but this one was getting personal. The audience was no longer sitting back for entertainment. They were choosing sides, reacting with raw emotion to every line. The cameras kept rolling, but the sense of unease was growing. Bondi straightened her shoulders and prepared to speak again, but the atmosphere was already shifting into a full-blown confrontation. The battle lines were drawn. And before we go further, if you are just tuning in, smash that subscribe button now, because this ride is about to get even wilder. Colbert did not stop with the rally clips. He leaned forward, almost casually, and asked the control room to put up another slide on the big screen. Suddenly, across the stage, old headlines from Pam Bondi's time as Florida's Attorney General filled the backdrop. Stories about investigations, controversies, donations, and questions that had followed her for years. The audience shifted in their seats, murmuring as they read the words. Bondi glanced at the screen and then back at Colbert. She raised her chin and brushed it off. That is old noise. I fought for justice. I took on cases that mattered. I stood up for people who needed a voice. Her tone carried confidence, but her shoulders looked tight, as if she knew the spotlight was now burning hotter than before. The crowd reacted with a mix of sounds. Some clapped in support, but others booed sharply. It was no longer polite disagreement. It was charged energy, bouncing back and forth across the theater like sparks. Colbert, sensing the shift, pressed harder. He leaned closer, his voice sharp but still wrapped in humor. You talk about fighting for justice, Pam. But when these headlines roll, the fight looks more like damage control than victory. What do you say to people who believe you protected power instead of challenging it? Bondi's jaw tightened. She leaned forward in her chair, eyes locked on Colbert. I have battled real stakes, Stephen. Courtrooms are not comedy clubs. When I stood in front of judges, people's lives and freedoms were on the line. You cannot compare that to telling jokes into a camera. Her words cut through the air, but Colbert was ready. He smiled thinly and struck back. Stakes? Pam, you are trembling on quicksand. And right now, the more you move, the deeper you sink. The crowd gasped. A wave of noise swept across the room. Some laughed, others booed, and dozens of phones were suddenly lifted into the air. The tension was no longer just in the studio. It was spilling out into the world, as clips were already being uploaded, tweets flying, and social media exploding with reactions. Bondi gripped the arm of her chair tightly, her knuckles pale. She tried to steady herself, but her body language told the story her words could not. Her shoulders stiffened, her breathing quickened, and her eyes darted for a brief moment toward the audience before snapping back to Colbert. She was holding her ground, but it was clear that the pressure was pressing in from all sides. The lights overhead seemed hotter, the crowd louder, the cameras sharper. Every second stretched as Bondi tried to maintain composure while the confrontation escalated. Colbert leaned back in his chair. His eyes locked on Bondi, and then he delivered the line that pushed everything over the edge. He called her Trump's pawn. The words hung heavy in the room, and the crowd erupted instantly. Some laughed and cheered, while others shouted in protest. The tension that had been simmering now boiled over. Bondi snapped forward, her voice sharp and cutting. I am my own woman. I am not anyone's pawn. And let us be clear, Stephen. You are the clown in this room. She jabbed her finger toward him, her frustration spilling into every word. The audience reacted in waves. On one side, a thunderous chant of Colbert, Colbert, rose from the crowd, the rhythm echoing through the studio. On the other side, a smaller but loud group fought back with Go Pam, Go Pam. The sound was chaotic, clashing, and feeding the fire between guest and host. Bondi's face flushed as she tried to speak over the noise. Her hands shook as she gripped the arms of her chair, and sweat shone under the bright lights. She tried to regain her composure, but her voice cracked as she threw out a desperate line. I am not your punching bag. I will not sit here and let you humiliate me. Colbert leaned in with a smirk that only fueled the tension. Stand tall? You are shaking, Pam. The only one humiliating you right now is yourself. The crowd gasped, some laughing, others booing, as phones in nearly every row tilted upward to capture the moment. Clips were already being streamed live, while others prepared to flood TikTok and X with the chaos unfolding in real time. Bondi's breathing grew heavier. She tried to fire back again, but the words stumbled out. Her voice rose, then cracked, as she pushed harder. You do not understand. You sit behind a desk and throw jokes, but I have faced real battles. I have taken real hits, and I will not be mocked like this. Her defiance, though fierce, only showed how rattled she had become. She wiped at her forehead, her hand trembling as the sweat refused to stop. The more she fought back, the more Colbert pressed with subtle jabs and sarcastic smiles. He hardly needed to speak, because the energy in the room was telling the story. The chants grew louder, cameras flashed, and every word she said was clipped, shared, and dissected across social media. The breaking point had arrived, and everyone watching could feel it. Bondi's voice hit a pitch that no one expected. She slammed her hand down on Colbert's desk so hard that the mugs rattled and the papers jumped. Her face was red, her jaw tight, and then she shouted, I will bury you. The room froze for a second. The audience did not know whether to laugh, boo, or cheer. Then the noise erupted in every direction at once. Colbert did not flinch. He leaned back in his chair, calm, almost smirking. You are finished, Pam. You are cracking live in front of everyone. His tone was sharp but steady, and it cut through the chaos. Bondi's breathing grew heavier as she fought to keep control. Her eyes filled, and then the tears spilled down her cheeks. She wiped them away fast, but it was too late. The crowd saw it, and the moment spread like wildfire through the studio. The audience roared louder than ever, some booing, others chanting Colbert's name, while a smaller pocket tried to shout her down with support. The noise was deafening, a storm crashing inside four walls. Bondi tried to pull herself together, but the flood had started. She yanked at the mic clipped to her dress, ripping it off with a snap. The sound tech in the back winced, but the room was far too loud to notice. She stood up, her chair scraping across the floor, and pointed at Colbert. You are vile. You disgust me. I will not sit here and let you smear me on live television. The studio gasped, but Colbert stayed steady. He simply watched as Bondi made her move. She tried to walk off, but security was already stepping forward. The producers in the wings had rushed to the edge of the stage, arms waving, eyes wide with panic. Bondi thrashed against the hands that reached to guide her, jerking away, shouting at the top of her lungs. The chaos had hit full explosion. For a second, it looked like she would bolt right through the crowd, but then her body gave out. She broke down, dropping into a sob that seemed to shake the entire studio. The audience noise dipped for the first time in minutes, a stunned hush hanging for just a moment. Phones were raised higher than ever, dozens of angles catching the raw collapse. Colbert leaned in, his voice cutting clear through the storm. And there it is. That is the Bondi exit, folks. Tears and all. The line landed like a hammer, and the crowd went wild again. Some laughed, others booed, but the moment was sealed forever. The studio had turned into pandemonium. Fans were on their feet, shouting over each other. Security swarmed around Bondi, trying to move her without another outburst. Producers scrambled with headsets, barking orders that no one seemed able to follow. The stage looked like it was shaking under the sheer force of energy. Through it all, Colbert stayed planted at his desk, cool and steady, the center of the storm. He stacked his papers, tapped them on the desk, and simply smiled as the chaos burned around him. The meltdown was complete. Millions would see it replayed online within minutes. Bondi's career had just been reduced to a viral collapse, and Colbert had signed it off with one unforgettable line. Backstage, the noise of the studio still roared like thunder, but Pam Bondi was no longer in the spotlight. She collapsed into a chair, her shoulders shaking, her face buried in her hands. Through sobs, she muttered, "He is a beast. He humiliated me in front of the entire world." Her aides rushed in, kneeling beside her, patting her back, whispering that she would be fine. But the damage was clear. Her makeup was streaked, her eyes swollen, and the fight in her voice was gone on stage. The opposite picture was unfolding. Stephen Colbert stood tall, pacing with a swagger that only comes from victory. The crowd was still buzzing, shouting his name, and he leaned into it. He smirked, gave a mock bow toward the exit Bondi had stormed through, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, that was Pam Bondi. Please, tip your waiters." The audience erupted, their cheers louder than ever. It felt like a concert more than a talk show. Phones lit up every corner of the studio. Dozens of clips had already been filmed from different angles, and by the time the crowd left the theater, those clips were flying across TikTok, Instagram, and X. Some fans posted memes within minutes, editing Bondi's tearful face into GIFs, overlaying her "I'll bury you" line with dramatic music, and mocking the way she stormed out. Others cut together Colbert's final taunt, looping it again and again with captions like, "Colbert wins," and "Pam breaks live." By the time the sun came up the next morning, the story was everywhere. Major outlets ran headlines that did not hold back. "Pam Bondi crushed on Colbert," one read. Another splashed across morning news. "Pam melts down on late night." Her collapse was replayed in clips that topped trending charts before breakfast. For many, this was not just a bad interview. It was career-shaking. Bondi herself tried to claw back some ground. Later that day, she posted a statement online, promising that she would not be defined by what happened on a late-night comedy stage. "I will rise again," she wrote, defiant and bold, trying to sound unbroken. But the internet did not buy it. Replies poured in, mocking her words, twisting them into jokes. Memes used her own "rise again" line to show her tripping on stage, crying into tissues, or walking into Colbert's desk. Every attempt to stand strong was drowned out by a flood of backlash. What had started as an interview became a cultural storm. Bondi's team tried to contain it, but the clip had already lived a million lives online. Colbert, on the other hand, leaned back and let the storm play in his favor. He had delivered the knockout, and the internet crowned him the winner without question. The fallout was sealed. Pam Bondi left that stage broken, but Colbert left with the clip of the year. One career stumbled, the other soared, and millions of viewers had watched the balance shift in real time. Analysts wasted no time weighing in on what had just unfolded. Some said Stephen Colbert had done exactly what late-night hosts were supposed to do, exposing weakness in the powerful and holding them accountable. Others asked if he went too far, if the relentless mocking pushed Pam Bondi beyond the edge in a way that crossed the line from comedy into cruelty. But one thing was clear. No one left that broadcast without remembering who won and who crumbled. Pam Bondi's reputation, once defined by her image as a steely loyalist who stood firm no matter the fight, shifted overnight. She was no longer the unshakable figure her allies described. She was now the guest who cried on live television, the one who stormed off under the weight of an audience's laughter. That clip became her legacy in a way years of political work never did. For Colbert, it was the opposite story. His ratings spiked, clips of the showdown drove millions of views, and his dominance in late night was reinforced. He did not just land a viral moment. He cemented himself as the sharpest player in the game, someone unafraid to turn an interview into a battlefield and walk away as the clear victor. But the fallout stretched further than just television. Within political circles, Trump loyalists fumed. Some whispered that Bondi had been set up to fail. Others argued she should never have gone on in the first place. Talk swirled about whether she would strike back, maybe launch her own counterattack on Colbert through interviews or social media. Yet for every attempt at defiance, the internet still pointed back to the clip of her meltdown. It was the cultural image that stuck, and nothing she said afterward could erase it. Looking back, That night became a turning point. It was not just another interview gone wrong. It was a chaotic cultural moment that showed how late-night TV could destroy a reputation in real time, with millions of people watching and millions more sharing it the next morning. It changed the playbook for how guests approached shows like Colbert's and set a new bar for what counted as a late-night victory. This showdown rewrote the rulebook. If you want more breakdowns of the biggest meltdowns rocking politics and pop culture, make sure you subscribe right now because this firestorm is just the beginning.